Hello and welcome to Top Landing Gear Full Flaps and to the full-length version of our visit to historic Croydon Aerodrome, London's airport at the birth of commercial aviation in the 1920s, right up until 1959, when that role passed to what is now London Heathrow. We're incredibly fortunate that the main terminal building and control tower at Croydon have been preserved, and with it a major chapter in aviation history. No one knows more about its history than our guide for the day, Ian Walker, former Chair of Trustees of the historic Croydon Airport Trust, now an A380 Captain with BA. And while you're listening, you might like to visit historiccroydonairport.org.uk, where you'll be able to see much of what we're talking about here. This is Top Landing Gear. We've stepped back in time. We're at Croydon Aerodrome. In fact, we're now with Ian Walker from the Croydon Historic Airport Trust.
Almost very close, yeah. Historic Croydon Airport Trust. HCAT.
HCAT. Ian, it's so exciting to be here. This has been in our plans for so many years. A historic building in front of us. Just tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, first of all, thanks for coming on. It's great to see you all. So what we're standing in front of at the moment, we're standing in front of the predecessor airport to London Heathrow. The terminal building we're seeing here opened in 1928. This place became London's airport in 1920. And it was Britain's international airport. This was the designated place that you would fly from if you wanted to travel anywhere in the world, just as air travel started. So very, very important building. And also the building itself was a real step change in airport terminal design. Really, it was the first time that we had a purpose-built airport terminal put together to serve air traffic and air passengers.
Yeah, so it contained everything that you needed to run an airport inside.
This is, we have to sort of go back to the time. Air travel it's so new. It only started in 1919. So there's no real plan of what it's going to look like or something to build on a model. They're actually developing it as it goes along. So the first airports that existed, and there weren't many of them, really, they were just repurposed World War I airfields. So whatever buildings they had, they just designated those as a check-in desk for one airline or another airline, mail, cargo, customs, administration and all the other functions that you had. But this is the first time they looked at all those functions and put it together in one building, so it worked really well. And it flowed as well, and it split into two halves. So simple terms, you've got inbound and outbound. That's the two things that happen at an airport. So it was symmetrical in the way it operated. But this is the first time that's happened. And it had some great design features that made it really super efficient at the time.
So the term terminal, as in an airport terminal, as we now know, it came from the terminal building. Is this the
well? Yeah. I mean, the term was in use for railway terminals.
Yeah,
so
right,
it was very much that. This was an air terminal.
Yeah.
The actual title of it when they opened the building was Airport of London. But of course now we just say airport.
Yeah.
But at the time that was two separate words. It was airport because it was an entry into a country. And some things that were different as well that the general population getting used to is that a port was normally on the coast, and of course this is actually inland as well. So this is the whole new world that people are amazed to see airliners and people coming in from another country right into the centre, of a city. So this was really quite a big change as well.
And just to describe the look of the building, I mean, we've just said how beautiful it is. It is of its time, isn't it? 1920s, sort of Art Deco.
Yes, it is. It's sort of pre-Art Deco. It's just before that. It's sort of neoclassical. It's really almost getting to the latter stages of neoclassical as well. It was sort of known as restrained classical. So really you're trying to get those modernist features. It's sort of stripped down. It's not quite as ornate as maybe a classical building. Neoclassical is already stripping that down. But you're getting those functions and features there. But also you're starting to see some of the changes as well towards Art Deco. So you're starting
it's a bit like walking into a Hercule Poirot film.
Yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely. This is it is very much of that. It is of that era. So. It's a 1920s building, so right at the end of the 1920s. So designed by the Air Ministry, architects, in-house architects, they designed it all, and that was all completed around about 1926, 1927. It took about 18 months to build. It's built of steel frame, concrete blocks, 50,000 concrete blocks with precast. Over the years, it's been extended. And when it opened, it was the world's biggest airport. So it was really quite a thing at the time. It attracted thousands of people as well, just as a place to come and visit as well. It was a really big tourist attraction. So much so that they were overwhelmed with the amount of people that were coming down here. They had to start employing full-time tour guides to actually take people around.
And they're still doing it. There you are.
Yeah, I just don't get paid, unfortunately. I do it for the love.
And you might be able to hear the pearly way behind us, but what a great view they have as they drive past this, because we're sheltering underneath this beautiful de Havilland Dove, which is the kind of it's your
well this is the 4-engine Dove, so this is
sorry,
the
de Havilland Heron. I can't believe I got that wrong. The Heron.
We can do that bit again.
Yeah, we are going to do it. He won't let it. I can't believe that because James called it a Dove, and I knew it was a Heron because the first aircraft I ever flew in was a pleasure flight at Biggin Hill in about 1965 in a Heron.
Yeah. I mean,
Roy, if you keep that in, I'll kill you. No, he's not going to pass that.
He's staying now.
Yeah. Oh, look, and we're standing beneath a heron. Beautiful de Havilland Heron.
Yeah, this was this heron here. The reason we have it here is the Gate Guardian is that the airport closed in 1959, so that's when it ceased operations, and that was the end of the era. And the last flight out was by Morton Air Services to Rotterdam on the de Havilland Heron here. And that was on the 30th of September 1959. And the pilot that controls, the captain, is a chap called Geoffrey Last. So he operated the last flight
Very
out.
appropriate.
So yeah, absolutely. So, and that was the last commercial service. So that's why here really. And this was really about the biggest thing you could get in here. It was a grass airfield, so you never had tarmac runways. So it was limited really on what it could handle then. So.
Because all the pictures and film that we see now, looking back to the early days of Croydon when it was in its at its peak, these wonderful old aircraft like the Handley Page HP-42, which I just love. I don't suppose they exist anymore.
No, they only ever built 8. When Imperial Airways were ordering aircraft, they generally did it in 8s, so everything was built in 8. Which, of course, if you're a manufacturer, it makes it very, very difficult to make any money. Yeah. So, because it's such a limited run, some of the more successful airliners were things like the Havilland Dragon or Rapide, because they were sort of smaller twin-engine aircraft. Didn't carry as many passengers, but they built a lot of those. There's around about 700 of those
still
built.
flying.
Exactly. But the HP-42s, all those pre-Second World War aircraft, the big airliners, none of them survived the war. One with HP-42, it's just starting to get fatigue and corrosion with it internally. So they were pressed into serve in the Second World War. Some got damaged, and then some just were deteriorating, so got scrapped, and that was that.
What's a shame, because the cabins looked beautiful, didn't they? And
fantastic.
And they had a great safety record, didn't they?
They were, yeah. They all the time they were in commercial service with Imperial. They didn't have any major accidents at all, so sort of no deaths or injuries. No. Probably because they were super slow, did about 90 miles an hour, so you didn't hit anything fast. So it was all in slow time.
You can still crash with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So everything happened in slow time, so you weren't going anywhere fast, which is why they're so luxurious, because you're in the aeroplane for a long time. Yeah. But they were a great aeroplane. So, and they're very iconic. I mean, really the HP-42 was the ultimate development of the biplane airliner. That was it, really. They're the sort of biggest biplane airliner built, sort of 130-foot wingspan, and after that into the 30s you're starting to see the monoplanes coming, really, and you're then getting that change in design. You're getting sort of an airliner that we recognise sort of today, really, something that's a bit more aerodynamic, goes a little bit faster, it starts having some more sophisticated equipment on it, like retractable undercarriage, and moves like that. But do you want to have a quick run round? I'll sort of talk about the building very quickly, or do you want to go in? So here we are, main entrance. So this is where the passengers arrive. The way your ticketing worked at the time with Imperial Airways, we only had one airline at the time, is that your ticket would actually start at the Victoria Hotel up in London. They bring you down here and drop you off. Or you might have your own your chauffeur drop you off, because people were very wealthy at the time. So generally, actually, there wasn't much car parking or anything. So that's how your ticketing worked. So the building's actually, I was sort of saying, it's symmetrical. It's split into two halves. So the wing we can see on the right, sort of, that is where goods would come in. So they come in off the Pearly Way, they back up into the doorways, and we'll see more of those as we go around the side in a minute. The goods get unloaded, bonded, stored, and then they get manhandled onto an aircraft. And it's all manual handling, so you didn't have, baggage belts, etc. It was chaps just throwing bags around and cargo and loading it up by hand. And then conversely, when the aircraft arrive, they get unloaded, and then they go into the wing on that side, which is the bonded stores on that side. And then they get all dealt with and then loaded up into vehicles, and then they come out and drive off into the Pearly Way. And the Pearly Way here, actually, it was one of the first bypasses built in the UK. So that was actually opened in 1925 because Croydon had quite heavy traffic even then. So nothing's changed. But here we are, sort of 100 years later. But that's the reason the road was put in there, one of the early bypass. Next door to the terminal here is where we've got the Aerodrome Hotel. That was built at the same time as this terminal was built in 1928. It's been extended over the years. That's one of the world's first purpose-built airport hotels as well. And that's where Amy Johnson stayed as well on the eve of her record-breaking flight. And she complained about the noise on the Pearly Way, so she couldn't get any sleep.
I've stayed in that hotel, and I know what she means.
Yeah, that's right. You have great empathy with her. But we're sorry.
No, and I was just going to say, presumably all that stuff, the bonded warehousing stuff and all the passport control stuff would have been new to the world of aviation.
And it would. Yes, it did, and this became London's airport. It was known as London Terminal Aerodrome originally in 1920. So we had very much so, I suppose, a temporary airfield at Hounslow Heath, and the first scheduled commercial flight was 25th of August 1919. But that airfield was owned by cavalry, and they wanted their airfield back. So everything had to move out, and they came down to Croydon, which also was a World War I airfield, but much, much bigger. But yes, something that you needed was customs facilities. But that was actually all run from the Port of London, so that's where the customs officers came from.
Right. So was Croydon at the time considered sort of part of London, or was it an outlying?
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer.
Okay, I'll take that on that then.
So, no, in as much as that, Croydon's one of these ones. It's in the London Borough of Croydon now, so I'm not sure. It may well have been considered part of Greater London. Yeah. I don't really know on that one.
A friend of mine she used to work for Chanel.
Oh, okay.
And Chanel's headquarters are in Croydon.
Yeah, they're literally just down the road.
And they moved their headquarters to Croydon in the late 20s because they thought, well, this is going to be the centre of aviation where everyone's going to come and go. And that's why Chanel are here.
Yeah, there is. And they've got a fabulous Art Deco building just around the corner, literally about half a mile away, that got bombed in the Second World War.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was one of the Battle of Britain. There was a big bombing raid on Croydon on the 15th of August 1940. Airfield was hit, but a load of the factories and the Chanel factory got hit as well there. So anyway, we're backtrack a little bit here. So what we're looking at here, so originally the building was just 2 stories. You've got these sort of big mock columns, spandrel panels between the windows, give the idea of it's all just one open space inside, but it's not. It's actually 2 stories. Originally would have been steel framed windows as well. Like Crittall windows, they're not made by Crittall, but it was that design. They're actually made by a company up in Wolverhampton as well. You can see they sort of got this margin around the window as well, which is sort of getting towards sort of Art Deco styling, but it's pre-Art Deco. But you're starting to see those sort of features come in, so it's sort of modernist in design and styling. But as we walk around the side, we can actually sort of see how this sort of cargo wing would work. The building's been extended over the years. So originally, the building would have stopped just about where that column is there, so about 3 bays in. If you look through the window, you can probably see some railings of the staircase there. Yeah. So originally that was the end of the building, and it went back that way. So it got extended forwards and upwards. So during the Second World War, but only half the roof got extended. So that's just to cope with the sheer volume of sort of passenger numbers going through. But each of these doorways was for cargo handling. So vehicles would come in, they back up, get loaded up, and then off they go. Airmail was a huge thing, in the interwar period, even post Second World War, actually. And so there was an awful lot of airmail going through here. 65% of all the airmail went through Croydon. So 84% of all the cargo. And even in the 1930s, as you're starting to get more airports coming online, sort of little regional airports are starting to spring up. Croydon's still handling 49% of all the passengers in the UK.
Were there specific cargo airlines, or did the cargo go on passenger flights?
No, they generally went on passenger flights there. I think you're starting to get more of a change of that post-Second World War. So sort of pre-Second World War, in the interwar period, there was only one airline. It was Imperial Airways. They had the monopoly. And then that started to get broken up in the 1930s, sort of mid-1930s. That's where you get British Airways Limited come along. And they sort of they picked up the European routes, and Imperial really had the monopoly on the long-haul stuff. So there was no one else doing that. And even with the regional stuff, you're starting to get independent airlines. But they're very much doing sort of near-continent stuff, really.
So in that 1920s, when this started, what was the how many flights a day would you be getting?
It wasn't many. When the airfield first opened, you get about a dozen. But those numbers went up, until you're getting sort of 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 a day. I mean, probably the best way to sort of summarise it, so the airfield, first year of operations, of commercial operations, you had about 6,500 passengers come through. The second year, 1921, 10,500. This terminal opened in 1928, so 26,000 passengers.
Gosh.
So, but we get to 1931, you're getting 45,000 passengers. 32, you're getting 70,000 passengers. Wow. And by 1936, you're getting 120,000 passengers. So from 1931 to 36, you've almost tripled your passenger numbers.
How many airlines, apart from Imperial, were operating? Presumably foreign airlines.
This is it. This was Britain's gateway airport. This is the one initially that only had the approval to do that. So you had this as the primary. The diversion airfield was Lymm on the coast, and this was it in the 1920s. 1930s, a few more came along online, but not many. But the airlines, you're getting all the national carriers. So you were getting Air Union, which is now Air France. You get Sabina, which is now Air Belgium. And you're getting Lufthansa, which is Lufthansa. But you're getting all the European airlines coming in here. So this was the main destination. Later in the 1930s, they were doing the odd service to other airports as they were getting developed. But really, those frequencies were really, really small. And anything that we consider long haul was all out of Croydon. So if you wanted to go somewhere intercontinental, it was all out of Croydon. So, Imperial very much had the monopoly on that.
Flying boats were still going at that stage?
Flying boats started to come in the mid-1930s.
Right.
And that was, originally that was down in Poole.
Yeah.
And I think there was also some going out Southampton. Not my area of expertise because it's not Croydon. So I don't know much on that one. So they did have flying boats. But, they were developing it. It was... I think if we think about sort of air travel at the time, when it started... 1919, the thoughts were that aircraft would probably do Europe, short-haul stuff, what we call short-haul now, and airships would do the long-range stuff because they had the range to do it. As it was, aircraft developed sufficiently enough that long-haul travel became possible, but not in the way we do it today. It was done like short-haul. It was lots of short hops. Yeah. If you've got an HP-42, which was the mainstay of the Imperial Airways fleet doing 90 miles an hour, it took you a long time to get down to, South Africa.
Yeah. I saw, the Brisbane flight route was was one of the earlier. Was much
Yeah.
earlier than I expected it to be.
Yeah.
How long did it take to get to Brisbane?
Well, initially that was 14 days.
Right, yeah.
So, however, to put that into context, that was saving over half the time you could do it the other way, which was boat and train.
Yeah.
It was 40 days otherwise. So really that revolutionised communication. And that was the main thing with it, is that even though it was, by today's standards, a long time, it was a lot quicker than the alternative.
And building the infrastructure along those routes must have been a colossal operation.
It was huge. I mean, even this, air travel is completely new. You're starting from scratch. It's like, what does air travel look like? What infrastructure do you need? What do we need to make this all work? Because it's not just a terminal, it's all those support services as well. So we'll touch on radio communications and radio navigation and how that started. But a lot of these places as well were really undeveloped. They were having to find suitable landing grounds and then sort of build a mini airport around it. And Imperial Airways had a series of outstations. Some places they were actually building infrastructure there so they could service their operations. So you would get, engineering facilities. You'd get sort of almost mini hotels. You can put your passengers up overnight and your staff as well. You have petrol supplies. And everything you need really to keep your service going, and some of the airfields started just like that. Imperial Airways said, right, we need a landing ground here. We need some facilities, so they'd actually build it. So,
and was this was just a service for the very wealthy? Would you say?
It was wealthy business people and government staff. So at the time, Britain's got this sort of huge amount of overseas interest, and this is one of the big pushes behind Imperial Airways. They're trying to connect all their overseas interests at the time, so they're trying to keep that all connected and communicating with that as well. And this was a quicker way of doing that, so that's how it worked. So,
and on these series of hops on the longer haul, would one aircraft do the first hop and then return, or would it be the same aircraft?
They generally carry on. Yeah, right. That's right. They sort of generally carry on. They might change aircraft halfway down the route, and you did get some really convoluted routes as well. So, for example, going off to sort of the Near East, you'd go through Europe. You couldn't fly over Italy, so you go by train. You then get a flying boat. Then go down to Cairo, and then you pick up another aircraft. But you get these multiple changes. So it was quite
exciting.
Yeah, it was quite an adventure. It was quite an adventure.
Even in the 50s, 60s, my mother was a cabin crew, or an air hostess they were called. And they used to do, I think, Alexandria or something. It used to take 4 days then.
Yeah.
Because it was all done in short hops. There were no real long-haul dedicated aircraft that really worked until the sort of 60s.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we touched on flying boats. Even when the flying boats came in, they still didn't really quite have the range. This is why they'd stop off at the Azores or Bermuda, and that's why they were...
What a hardship.
Yeah, that's right. How dreadful, yeah. Which is why they were boats, really, that flew, because it's like, what's the way around the problem? This is it. Trying to go transatlantic was really difficult. Yeah. It's a long, long way, especially when you're going westbound, you're against the wind. So it's quite difficult. I'm just going to sort of... just talk about the sort of back of the building as we're here. So this corner here, we can see we've got a change in styling on the ground floor, just with these two columns here. You've got these two sort of skinny columns, and then the columns just above the first floor level are actually, replicate the rest of the building. So the reason that's like that is in the Second World War, this became part of RAF Fighter Command 11 Group. So this was a Battle of Britain airfield. On the 15th of August 1940, the airfield was heavily bombed, and that corner of the building actually got bombed out, so it all got blown out. So when they're actually rebuilding it, of course, they haven't really got the time or the blocks to build it in exactly the same styling, so they just needed really to close the building up. So that's why you've got these skinny columns there, and really that's a reminder of what happened at that time when it was a Battle
Was
of
it
Britain.
called RAF Croydon?
It was called RAF Croydon,
because a couple of airfields joined together.
So when it originally started, right back in World War One, it was two airfields. So you had Royal Flying Corps Station Bennington, and you also had the airfield with the National Aircraft Factory as well. And they amalgamated those two together. And they used various different sides of the airfield. I mean, the main landing ground really was just to the west of Plough Lane. It used to go straight through the airfield, which they eventually closed off. So it was two airfields. One was the aircraft factory testing aircraft, and the other one was what the RFC stroke RAF used. And then post-World War I, that was all came together. They made it one big airfield, generally known as RFC Beddington, but it was also known as RAF Croydon as well at the time. So there's another chart we found in 1919. So it got called all sorts of things. So
Wadden as well.
Wadden, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because it was in Wadden, so it was called that. But we're around the back now. So just talk about this very, very briefly. The base of the control tower.
Oh, this is stunning. This is so exciting. We're looking up at
this
the control
is
tower
the
here.
world's oldest surviving air traffic control tower. So it's not the first one built. The first one built was built here at Croydon in 1920, which is a timber structure. It was a very simple structure. It was really it was a shed on stilts. So that was the first control tower. That was 1920. But this became operational in 1928, so the actual tower itself is 50 foot high, and with the radio mast as well, that gives it another 30 feet. So it's over 80 feet in total in height, 4 stories, and each floor served a particular task. So on the ground floor, you would have had the traffic hands and your customs officials. The first floor is where the Met Office staff were as well. So the Met Office came under the Air Ministry. The Air Ministry ran the operation, so they regulated aviation, but they also operated the airport as well. And then just below the balcony were the sleeping quarters for the staff here. It's 24/7 operation, so that's where the radio officers sleep, the CATOs, the Civil Aviation Traffic Officers, which are your fledgling air traffic controllers, and your Met Office staff as well. And then at the top, that's where the CATOs, the air traffic officers, worked, and the radio officers, sort of handling all the traffic at the time.
You say 24-hour operation. You weren't getting flights during the night, were you?
You did get some, not many, but they would have a watch here on duty, because sometimes stuff gets delayed. They also have early morning flights going out as well. So it wasn't quite 24/7 as maybe some airports are, but there would always be somebody here on duty as well.
Wow. That's quite brave.
Yeah, it is.
In those days.
And they didn't have many staff as well, so they're working quite long shifts as well, which is why they've had sleeping facilities, but it's all catered for.
And where we're standing now would have been the apron.
This would have been the apron.
How exciting. I'm going to close my eyes and imagine HB42
This is it.
just parked to my right.
Describe what's here now.
Let's not.
I'm taking pictures, so we can put some pictures to accompany the episode when it goes out, so you can actually imagine what we're seeing or what we might have seen.
We are surrounded by a car park with some industrial buildings, one of which I can't believe ever got planning permission to ever be. It's probably the ugliest building I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
With that as well. Well done, yeah.
It was an industrial unit, and they've converted it to living accommodation now. I'm not sure if I'd really want to live there personally, but
it looks absolutely awful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, it's not very salubrious now, but back in the day, this was magnificent.
Facing this way, facing the airport building, it's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, so the aircraft would come in from the north, so from our left as we're standing here looking at the tower. They'd sort of park up here. Passengers would get off and they go in through the arrivals gate there, and then the aircraft would shuffle along, get reloaded up, and the passengers would come out the departure gate there. So we've got the world's first arrivals and departures gate. So, and they're separated out. This is quite an important thing with this building, is those processes have been separated out, and we can see we're getting that flow of people and traffic going through the building. So this was really a big step. And of course, all airports are built like this now. Now they just do it on 2 levels. You tend to have an arrivals level and a departure level. This is the first time you're getting that concept put into a building. Also an air traffic control tower as well, purpose-built, very much dedicated to supporting air transport operations. Your cargo operations are all catered for, your mails catered for. Bullion would come in here as well. You'd have gold bullion here as well.
Was there any sense of security or separation of arrivals and departures, or was it a melee? Whoever
you did have a customs hall that people would go through, and they go through customs, they go through special branch, and special branch. And you also have Port Health as well here as well. So you get all the stuff that you would get now was all starting to come together. It's the first time you've got a building where that's all working really seamlessly. I mean, the process was really quite quick. You could turn up here and get processed in about 10 minutes and be on the aeroplane.
Oh,
you know.
Imagine.
Yeah, imagine, yes. What a dream. So it's not like it is nowadays. But there again, passenger volumes are so much lower. So, that was easy to do. I mean, you did have a huge increase in passenger numbers. When we said, like I was saying, the first year of operation, 26,000 people. By 1936, 120,000 people. The outbreak of the Second World War, you got 200,000 people. So that's a massive, massive increase. It's the biggest growth in air travel we've ever seen, really. It was sort of that period in the 1930s.
As far as we know, it all was.
Yeah, it all worked really, really well, and that's why we saw the extension to the building. That first extension was the you're just getting that huge growth in traffic, and the building was designed as well to be extended. It's still framed, and they put in all the sort of design features you need to be able to sort of
just add on to it
as well. So they're really worth thinking ahead. So it's a great bit designed by the Air Ministry. So. Would you like to go inside where it's warmer?
It's quite cold.
Yes, it's quite cold, yes. So we're now in the booking hall. So this is where people would arrive when they started their journey to wherever they were going in the world. 1928 when this opened, so this was the world's biggest airport. So we'd never seen anything like this at the time. So a dedicated airport that's been planned out and provisions been put in to handle passengers and cargo and bullion and airmail as well.
And you can almost hear that now, can't you? You can almost hear those passengers checking in all those years ago.
It's got that feel. But we've got this, fantastic glass dome.
It's a beautiful atrium, isn't it?
It is great. It is fantastic. So, but this is, architecturally as well. We start to see these features coming into airport design. It's top lit as well. So, Norman Foster likes that in his airport design. He has lots of, top lighting coming in, which, bathes it in natural light. At the time, every part of the building actually had natural light into it. Even if they had to put sort of skylights into a few of the sort of the corridor areas, every part of the building had natural light. So it's a really nice environment to work in.
Considering it was government architects, it's actually quite forward-thinking, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. It was
there's a bit of imagination.
Yeah, it's a really well-designed building. They did a fantastic job doing that. And it was the Buildings and Works. Yeah, the Ministry of Buildings and Works designed the building, and put it all together. And they did come up with a fantastic design. What you don't see now, unfortunately, but what you did have at the time is you can see we've got sort of 3 bays either side. Each of those bays would have been a check-in desk for each of the airlines. So you've had Imperial Airways desk. They had 2 because one for cargo. You have had Sabina. You would have had Lufthansa. You would have had Air Union. You would have had KLM. So they all would have had desks here. In fact, actually, I'm not sure if Sabina actually had a desk. They might have shared one. But you would have the airlines who had their desks here. And we've actually got some photos. If we go around, let's go around over to that corner. We can have a look at those. And you get a better idea what it looked like at the time. This in the corner, what we're seeing here, this is original. This would have been the post room at the time, and it's still a post room now. So one of the original features, but you can see what it looked like here. So we're standing over in that corner there, and that's the main doors there, but you can see sort of the check-in desks on the right. As Jez was saying as well about the sort of the octagonal clock structure
Tower.
there.
Yeah,
that's
what
right.
a shame they didn't keep that.
Yeah, departures and sort of arrivals indicator, and each clock face would either tell you what time your flight was departing or arriving, and each airline would have one of those faces. Only had 8 faces, so it's quite limited in what it could do, but it was, as an early indication, it worked well for a couple of years until there was too much traffic for it to cope with. But we can see very much what it was like at the time.
You said earlier that the Met briefing took place
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
here as well.
Yeah. So what we got, if we look that way, now the building's been changed a bit, but below the sort of wings of the world there, where we went through those double doors, that's originally where the Met board was. And we can see a picture of that up there. We can see those people looking at it. So what you've got there, you've got the southeast of England, you've got the Channel, and then you've got northern France there, and then you've got all the Met codes up there. So the pilots will actually come down to do their weather briefing, actually in the booking hall here, before they go off and launch off.
So two little things I've noticed, just looking on this picture behind us.
Yep.
The White Star Line, so they were the Titanic.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were into aircraft.
Well, shipping. Yeah. So you had LEP who do lots of shipping. They're still going. They're still in service today. So they'd be doing a lot of cargo handling. So you'd have that desk here as well. So you'd get a lot of air freight coming in, and something would go on for be shipped in, or to maybe places that Imperial Airways didn't go to. Just a way of this sort of, I suppose, integrated
thrilling tennis duel.
The headline.
Yeah. We need to look that up. So this photo is probably taken in about 1928.
It's a cracking photo. And just talking of photos, I also noticed, although obviously short-lived, there was a mooring tower for an R-33 airship.
That's it. That was very, very short-lived. Just the once. At great cost. It cost something like £20,000 to build, which is 1920s money, which is an awful lot of money. And this, of course, is when they're looking at developing airship services. So they're trialling it. The airship station was up at Pulham in Norfolk. So that was like the airship base. Yeah. And that's where they envisaged that sort of airship operations would start from. So as it was, the airship experiment, really after the R101 disaster, that really put an end to it. And it was already struggling as a program. Trying to design an airship of the size and scale you needed was actually quite a difficult task. The R101 really wasn't ideal for the task.
Finishing with the A380.
Yeah, that's a fabulous aeroplane. Steady on. I'll have nothing nasty said about 380. It's a beautiful aeroplane. Only an aeroplane that its mother could love. So, so this is sort of very much what it was like at the time. It sort of gives you a feel of it.
One of the most fantastic things about being here is the number of photographs which are adorned every space. You can just walk around. We're going to put all these photos. Jez is going around taking pictures of all the pictures, and we will stick them all on every social thing we have. There's an enormous painting here.
Yes, so the mural, this was actually commissioned by the British Airports Authority for the opening of T1 at Heathrow in 1969, and it was unveiled by the Queen and Prince Philip then. It's painted by an artist called William Kempster, who was a very successful sort of mural artist back in the sort of 50s and 60s. He did some work for the Festival of Britain as well. So he came up with this, which was sort of the history of aviation, which really charts sort of air travel in Britain at the time. So on the left, you've got Hounslow Heath, which was very briefly Britain's airport for about 6 months before it moved to Croydon. So in the centre, you've got the first air traffic control tower at Croydon, the timber structure, and that's actually the second variation. It got extended upwards. And then over on the right, you've got the new terminal and the tower there all lit up. And also sort of all the aircraft that are in service with Aircraft Transport and Travel, Hadley Page, Instone and Daimler, who were eventually all amalgamated to become Imperial, which is over on the right-hand side. And we can see their Argosy there and their HP-42. And all these characters are they're the sort of major figures in aviation at the time. But yeah, it's a fabulous piece of art. But when Terminal 1 was demolished, everything was taken out, and this went up for auction, which was actually, it's the Mars Gallery who own it, and they've loaned it to us. Okay. So, but it's a great piece.
Oh, it's stunning.
It's really good. It's a great piece.
Quite a few passengers coming through now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's ready for their flights. 10 minutes and they'll be done. They'll be boarded. So on their way off across the channel. VFR, of course, visual flight rules. So Actually, it was pre-visual flight rules. It was visual navigation with a little bit of radio position fixing to help when you're on this side. So there's a sort of a few more pictures here, really, that give more of the history. This is quite good. This is sort of takes us back in time a little bit to the first airport, how it started off. So originally it was a World War I airfield, put here to defend against Zeppelin raids. They also built a National Aircraft Factory number 1, to build DH9s for the war effort. And then post-World War I, the RAF had pulled out, and then they've developed it to be London's terminal aerodrome, Britain's international airport. So we can sort of see that here, really. We're starting to develop, but they're sort of repurposing all those buildings. There's a road running through the centre. We spoke about the 2 airfields they had that were amalgamated together. So this was sort of the terminal. The flying side was that side. So you'd get on your aeroplane here. They'd load it up, come across here. They'd have a level crossing to go across the road. The aircraft go across the road. It's a bit like jib. And then they take off on that side. Customs facilities, corrugated huts. So very simple. First navigation aid, Croydon in big letters. So simple but effective.
Yeah.
So you found the right place. And this is the second control tower, which was extended upwards. That's your first control tower there. So that photo was taken in 1921. That became operational in 1920. And that really was quite revolutionary at the time.
Looks like a commentary box.
Describe that control tower for someone listening. Right? Come on.
Yeah, it's on stilts, and it literally looks like a commentary box at a gymkhana or so. Or
and I think that's
not a gymkhana, a gymkhana.
And I think that's probably where the influence came from. So the Air Ministry commissioned it on the 25th of February 1920. They approved the build of that, and they approved the finance for it in 1920. But it was
Approved the finance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
£8.
It was close. It was £200. It was £200.
It is a garden shed.
Yeah. They did specify it should be 8 foot square. And it should be 15 feet above the ground. So.
And it had to have 4 windows.
Yeah, it did. Window on each side. Yeah, and it had to have a wind vane as well that was geared down into the hut as well. So the personnel inside, the CATOs, Civil Aviation Traffic Officers, could take wind readouts as well. So, but it is the start of air traffic control and air traffic control towers. So, as simple as it is, and it looks quite Heath Robinson, it was a real step change at the time.
It was the first one in the world.
It was, yeah, it's very much so. Britain's very much. This is an area where Britain sort of really drove, I think, what we see as air traffic control. I think Britain was very good at administration, and this is one thing that we were very much looking at and put some focus on, really, was really supporting air transport operations. We were also, I think, had some really strong advantages as well, just during the World War I, because we developed quite quickly radio, and we got very advanced with that, and the amount of aircraft we had with radios in as well, which again at the time was quite revolutionary at the time. We had a lot of expertise and experience of that. We could actually sort of then transfer those skills and that expertise across into civil air transport as well. So
was this down to Peter Eckersley?
Peter Eckersley was quite.
Part in that, wasn't he?
He was, yes. He was with Marconi. Marconi, a lot of their personnel were seconded to the military in World War I to develop radio. So what we had at the time, just conscious there's a bit of background noise here, so why we're not competing with that. But yeah, so they were brought in to develop radio. At the time, the radio you had was spark gap transmitters, so pretty much a big spark plug, sending Morse code. So, but they're trying to develop this into something you could use on an aircraft, get an aircraft-type radio. But valves were sort of very much revolutionary. So it was the Marconi engineers and Peter Eckersley who developed valves for radios, which most people don't know what they are now, but they look like a small light bulb. But it's very, very, very important development as well, because it then meant you can develop a radio that would carry radio transmissions rather than using basically big spark plugs to send a signal, send Morse code. And it was the valve radios that could use a method of transmitting called continuous wave, which is much better for speech radio.
I mentioned Eckersley because he was a busy lad, wasn't he?
He was.
He was one of the forerunners to the wireless at the BBC. He was the first chief engineer at the BBC and actually presented programmes on air as well. So, and he was also here at Croydon.
Well, he wasn't actually here at Croydon, but the technology that he developed was used here at Croydon. When they started developing these radios, for example, supporting air traffic control operations, it is a completely new type of radio. There wasn't anything off the shelf. Marconi had to build every component. And it was the same with the BBC as well. When they built that first transmitter, they're having to build every single component to make it work and make it operational. So the radio transmitter they actually developed here at Croydon was pretty much the blueprint that they used for the BBC when the BBC started transmitting.
Yeah, 1922.
That's it. Yeah. But it's all that technology that's developed really during the First World War by Peter Eckersley and the team, developing valve radios and then actually developing a radio that could be used in aircraft as well, that was light enough and robust enough that they could actually use that to communicate with them as well. Most importantly as well, the fact that you could actually have a radio on aircraft meant that you could actually use something called radio direction finding as well, which is really, really important. That's when we get to the start of radio navigation, and that was a huge leap, because that means you're not relying wholly on visual navigation, and that was a really, really big step. I mean, that was the thing that really impressed me when I first came here. So I first came here at the end of the noughties, so I went for a guided tour, because I knew I've lived in Croydon for years, never been here, so I thought I did a guided tour, and it's a fantastic building, mind-blowing history. And then when I got to the tower, they're talking about radio navigation and how it started here in Croydon. That completely blew my socks off, because that is a really major innovation for air navigation, for airline operations. Being able to use something that's not relying on the pilot being able to see the ground was a huge, huge step. And that was a really important development here.
Amazing, isn't it? And the Mayday was born here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a chap who, again, is sort of loosely connected with Peter Eckersley, a chap called Fred Stanley Mockford, who was based with 141 Squadron up at Biggin Hill. And they actually there was a radio development unit there that was originally at Brooklands, but then got moved to Biggin Hill, and they're developing radio and installing them in aircraft. So Stanley Mockford is installing all these radio units into aircraft, and the pilots getting trained in how to use them. And I think at the end of World War I, we had about 600 aircraft fitted with radio, which I think was more than any other military operation at the time. Because he's got loads of experience with radio. So when civil aviation started, he's come down to Hounslow Heath originally and started the radio operation there. And when that's closed, he's come down to Croydon. And so he knows an awful lot about radio operations. And he was the chap who came up with the Mayday distress phrase. And the reason for that was there wasn't anything in speech radio equivalent to SOS. So you needed something to be used as a phraseology that couldn't be confused with any aviation terms. So he came up with that phrase, which was allegedly inspired by the French Mayday, which I think is my really poor French, which is help me.
Help me, yes.
Yeah, that's right. So apparently that's what the French pilots were saying, the Belgian pilots. So he corrupted that into Mayday, the English word Mayday, because it doesn't sound like anything else to do with aviation. It's not a visibility, a speed or a height. Yeah. So that's how he came up with that phrase, which we've been using ever since. So it was adopted as the international standard, I think, in 1927, 1928. So, and we've been using that ever since. So extraordinary.
No, I haven't used it.
No, that is a bad day out, isn't it, really? That is a bad day out.
I could see the look in your eye before you asked the question.
It's already too late, isn't it?
We've got a few more pictures here. It's talking about air traffic control. So Croydon very much was sort of the birthplace of air traffic control. A lot of the systems and operations we have now were developed here. And one of the major reasons were this is Britain's busiest airport. It's one of the world's busiest airports. So getting all this operational experience and developing these new techniques. So we've got a chap here called Jimmy Jeffs. He was the first air traffic controller as such. Civil aviation.
He had licence number 1, I believe.
He did have licence number 1.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Which we've actually got up in the tower, so we can see that. So that's it. Oh. It was actually they didn't actually start issuing licenses until 1953, I think it was. So this was backdated, so to acknowledge his achievement. But he was much decorated as well. During the Second World War, he did a lot with air traffic control to develop the North Atlantic routes as well. So
he went out to the States, did he?
Yeah. So he was Commandant at Heathrow as well in the 50s. But he was very much one of the sort of pioneering team here at Croydon, developing it. We can see all those radio officers here at work, doing radio position fixing, talking to the aircraft. I mean, the way the role will work here, we're sort of leaping forward and handle the operation. So you've got two groups of people in the tower. You've got the radio officers, who are licensed and trained to handle the radios and the radio communications. And then you've got the CATOs, the Civil Aviation Traffic Officers, who are managing the traffic. So they're managing the operation. So they're getting the information for the radio officers. The radio officers pass the information on to the CATOs. CATOs will then plot it on a map. And then if they've got any other information, the CATOs will then give that information to the radio officers, who will then transmit it to the aircraft. Of course, an air traffic controller now does all that himself. But at the time, there were two very distinct roles.
Except for the North Atlantic, when you still have a radio operator in there.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, HF, crackle, crackle, crackle. And it was very much like that at the time, because they're transmitted on medium waves, so you did get a lot of interference and static as well. So they didn't have VHF until really it's the sort of Second World War, really, when that started coming in.
How far out were they starting to be able to plot aircraft?
Croydon had a really sort of super powerful transmitter. You know, this was sort of the air traffic control centre for Britain, but it was sort of the biggest, most powerful at the time. So when it went into operation, it had an operational range of 200 miles, but it could actually carry a lot further than that as well, especially when they get into long range as well. They could talk to aircraft. Some aircraft that were doing transatlantic stuff, sort of some of the record-breaking flights, they were talking to them thousands of miles away. But operationally, their area was 200 miles. And the radio position fixing as well, they could cover all that area, and they could get it accurate to 2 nautical miles within 2 minutes. They usually generally got it done in about 30 seconds. So, and that's manual plotting as well. That's these radio officers getting the bearings, talking to Pullum, talking to Lim, getting the cross-cut, pass it over to Jimmy Jeffs to plot it on the board. He'd mark it all up, and then he'd say, right, there you go, chaps, that's where he is, pass that information back. And they get it done really fast. And there's actually some great footage of that. Shell did a documentary called Airport. That came out they did that in 1934, but it's all filmed here. So you can see all that in action, and it's really, really good. It's really worth having a look at that, actually. You'll find that on YouTube. What do you want to look at now, then?
Upstairs?
Yeah, let's go. Let's go upstairs. We'll go up to the tower.
Just before we go up the tower, is that a pub? I'm looking at inside the...
It's the Imperial Restaurant, lounge and restaurant, yeah. Originally, the bar area was around this. The building's been much changed now. So originally, this would have been your arrivals channel. It would have said arrivals up there, and you would have come in, and departures would have been over there, and then the customs hall was the corridor we've been through, but it was about 4 times as wide. But now it's the Imperial Restaurant.
And is that open now? People can come... No, I'm not...
What are you trying to say?
It's closed now.
Do you want a beer?
No, is it open to anybody?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is it. I think it opens at lunchtimes.
Yeah. So people can come in and
absolutely.
Have a look around
Yeah. Yeah, they've got their own entrance as well off to the side as well. So
amazing. Little plug for the Imperial Lounge and Restaurant.
That's right. Yeah.
Let's go to the tower.
Yes, let's go into the tower and have a look there.
So we're in the corridor now.
Yes.
Towards the control tower.
That's it. We're in this corridor. Now, originally, this would have been the customs hall, so the inspection hall, which would have been about 4 or 5 times the width of this. People go through customs, special branch, port health, and then onto the aeroplane. We've got a whole array of photos here of different times of the airport, different aircraft. Some of the booking hall, lots of the Argosies, which were really the mainstay of Imperial Airways fleet, sort of pre the HP-42, open cockpit as well. So, which is really probably the last time you started to see sort of open.
There's a wonderful photo actually in the main booking hall of a pilot raising his pennant as he arrives.
That's right. Yeah,
out of the cockpit.
Do you not still do that?
Yeah, I think we've stopped this.
Yeah, the civil ensign. Yeah, so it was. Yeah, very much really a hangover from World War One. Pilots wanted to be in the environment. So that was how they were designed. But really, it wasn't ideal for airline pilots to be stuck out in the weather when it's raining, snowing, sleeting, etc., freezing cold. So that stopped, really. And really, when you start seeing things like the HP-42, you start to get enclosed cockpits. That becomes the norm. So it should as well. Yeah. So the photo we can see here in the corner goes right back to when this was a Royal Air Force training station back in 1919. And the chap in the centre, you may recognise him with some familiar features. So that's actually Prince Albert, Duke of York. So that was the Queen's father. He was actually the first member of the royal family to learn to fly, and he did his training here, along with his elder brother as well, was the Prince of Wales. Obviously later became King Edward VIII. So this is where they did their flying training. Churchill also did some flying lessons here as well, but he wasn't very good at it. He had quite a nasty accident that fortunately he survived. And after that one, he decided that flying, he wasn't very good at it. He was just going to be a passenger, but he definitely didn't have an aptitude for it. So I think it was fortunately his instructor lessened the impact as he stored him from about 80 feet. So, I think he got away just being very, very badly bruised. So, but it could have been interesting. Might have been interesting for our history as well. Yeah. But hey, pictures here of Amy Johnson. Amy, wonderful Amy, very successful aviator. It shows made her record-breaking flight here, 1930. Left here on the 5th of May, trying to beat Bert Hinkler's record. She didn't quite beat the record, but she did set up the world's record-breaking flight time for solo flight and a woman as well at the time, which was a big thing as well. Women started really getting into aviation because I think it was a field that they could quite clearly compete with men. So, and I think it was a big push. I think you're starting to get, really, I think the start of sort of the women's equality movement really making big strides in the 30s. Yeah. They've just got the full franchise in 1928. And we're seeing a lot of women pilots doing some great stuff in aviation, some incredible records. I mean, this was a real feat as well. You look at what she's doing at the time. She's flying halfway around the world. There's not loads of airports and loads of support. Some of the places she's landing, literally, it's a clearing in the jungle with some petrol cans that she has to find. She hasn't got proper aviation charts. She's aviating by bits of atlas. She's a really inexperienced pilot as well. She's just really got a private pilot's licence.
Yeah. A few dodgy landings on the way, weren't there?
Yeah, there were a few dodgy landings as well. But, I mean, she's flying in really difficult conditions. She's flying in desert, hot, high conditions, flying through monsoon, over mountain, over big stretches of water. So it was a really quite an amazing feat. I mean, just a feat of physical endurance as well to do it at that time. I mean, she was absolutely exhausted when she got there. Yeah. She's flying a gypsy moth there, but there's you can't even trim them out, so you're flying it all the time. These long flights, you're doing 8, 9, 10 hours a day after day. She got caught in a storm in the desert as well, a sandstorm, all sorts of stuff she had to overcome. So to actually get there was quite an achievement.
We interviewed Amanda Harrison, who started to emulate, to retrace those routes, but in her Tiger Moth. She said exactly what you're saying. You cannot take your hand off the controls for a moment. Yes. You are flying that thing every second of the way.
That's it. And that's really demanding. Doing that day after day after day. So
777.
Any comment you'd like to make on that one, Ian?
Well, I fly an Airbus.
Yes, the big one.
Big one.
The big fat one.
Much better. So,
and there was a handful of people to sort of wave her off, but thousands gathered at Croydon for her return.
It was extraordinary. Yeah. I mean, she was unknown, and she was no one really had heard of Amy Johnson. She was actually really quite keen and enthusiastic. She'd been working up at, an airfield, just supporting all the airport operations there. But no one had really heard of her.
Was that one near Mill Hill?
I can't
remember what it's called.
I can't remember what it is for the life of me either. As well, De Havilland used it as well. It would come to me. It's closed now. It will come. We'll come back to that. We'll edit that in later.
Yeah, exactly. Stag Lane.
That's it. Stag Lane. Brilliant. Hey. So she was.
The only problem is, Rob, it's going to sound like I've edited it in.
Just be a pause. That's a really bad edit.
That's it. I think we're all having senior moments there. So. Yeah, so there was literally just a handful of people to see her off, not thinking she was to do it, but very, very quickly she was starting to beat Bert Hinkler's record very early on, so it was looking really, really good. She was making fantastic time.
Well, I think she was beating the record as far as Karachi, wasn't
Yeah, that's right, she was. So she set up a new record flight time down to Karachi, but then she started, she had a few instruments, so she had a couple of difficult landings, damaged the aircraft, had to get the aircraft repaired. I mean, she had 2 incidents like that. So, but amazing, she still got it done, and she still managed to finish, which I think is extraordinary. So, and also just flying conditions she wouldn't have really known about as well. Karachi, it's 40 degrees at altitude as well. Yeah. So there's her thinking she's doing 60 miles an hour, when really she's probably doing about 75 miles an hour, which is coming in a lot faster to land. Of course, there's no brakes either as well, so it's not surprising she had difficulty slowing down once she did start the rollout. But yes, coming back to sort of when she came back as well, she came back in the August on an Imperial Airways flight. There was thousands and thousands of people here. There's about 100,000 people at the airfield, and there's a cavalcade as well going up to the Grosvenor House Hotel up in London, 12-mile route. That was just lined, I think, with about 1 million people as well. They put on all these special trains and buses, and sort of South London came to a standstill. She really was a massive, massive celebrity after that. It really, really was quite extraordinary. But this was, in the 30s, 20s and 30s, this really was all such a new big thing. The fact that people were flying great distances and actually achieving that was a real phenomenon at the time. Probably a bit like the space program in the 60s, the way that captured the public's imagination. Yeah. This was the equivalent of that in the 1920s and 1930s. No more questions.
Lovely.
Good.
Not at the moment, sir. Someone just walked through one of these double doors wearing one of those hats that covers your ears because it's very cold. It looked just like a flying helmet from the 1920s. I think I'm beginning to see ghosts here. I really am.
Oh, maybe so. Maybe so.
These displays are floor to ceiling on the stairway up to the top of the control tower, and they look amazing.
Yeah, they're good. We've had them in just a few months ago, actually. Yeah. So they've gone in. So these were sort of a few timetables that we used.
Some of the adverts, the Imperial Airways adverts.
We sort of blown those up to sort of show you how it was all operating. But you can see here, really, this is how you went anywhere. It was very much like almost like getting on a bus.
The graphic there of the England to Egypt to India route, and it actually highlights what's amazing about each airport, including Baghdad, Jewel of the East, and Basra, which some Brits will be very familiar with, Sinbad's home port, and for dates, oil and carpets, which
still to this day.
But yeah, it's a fantastic description of how air travel was at the time. It's just very, very different. So the aircraft just didn't have the range or the speed to really do everything in one hop. Initially you've got these handy page HP 42s doing 100 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour. As the 30s developed, aircraft got a little bit quicker and a little bit faster, but you're still only getting speeds of about 250 miles an hour. So everything's happening a little bit quicker, but not quite as quick as now. It's like Cape Town there, for example, London to Cape Town. Take you 12 days, which is, it's 10 and a half hours now, so a little bit quicker. But at the time, revolutionary, because your alternative was boat and train, which would take you weeks. I mean, Africa, down to Australia. Australia would be 40 days by boat. But flying, you could do it in 14 days, which is amazing at the time, quite extraordinary.
And only 10 minutes to get through security.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm in.
Don't you dream of that? Doesn't everyone dream of that? Big pictorial there of like the air traffic control tower and how that worked as well. So when it was opened, this got a lot of press at the time in various magazines. It was syndicated around the world, sort of talking about how the tower worked, different parts of the operation.
We're coming up to the top of the tower now.
Yes, we're going up to just the basic control tower where we've got a museum now. We've got that over 2 floors.
Okay.
So originally, what we're seeing now, so that section there, that was actually the roof. But the building got extended, and in the 90s they put sort of another extension on, just coming back here. And we've got a fabulous model of an HP-42, which was, at the time for Imperial Airways, it sort of transformed their operation. And it was a real luxury airliner. Last of the biplane airliners, but it was immense. The wingspan's 130 feet, so it is bigger than a 757. Two-car operation, enclosed cockpit. There was two variants of it. Imperial Airways called it HP-42 E or W. So E was for the eastern routes, so like the long-haul stuff, and the W was for western routes, which was for Europe. And the way the interior was configured was very slightly different. So for the E operation, only have 24 passengers and a bigger cargo area for carrying your mail and other goods. And then for the sort of the Western European operation, it carry 38 passengers.
I'll put up a grass strip as well.
Yeah, grass, desert. Yeah, that was it. No, I mean, really, in the 30s, 20s, there weren't tarmac runways, so there just weren't. I mean, I think in the UK, for example, pre-Second World War, in the whole of the UK, there might have been 9 hard runways. Post-Second World War, we had about 650. So the Second World War was a mass change in airport designs and operations. But at the time, this is what they were designed for. To give you an idea of the size of those wheels, they're about 5'6", so it was big. It's a big aeroplane, and they're tail draggers as well. They cruise at a very stately 95 miles an hour. So,
and what was the range?
The range on that, it could do about 500-600 miles in a day. So it would. So it would only fly for that sort of time, 5-6 hours. It's very luxurious inside. It was very much like a Pullman rail car. So it was very luxurious. And it was all business class, so there wasn't, it wasn't sort of club or economy, or business and economy.
And a galley, a sort of a small.
Yeah, the galley was in the centre. It was a really well thought out aeroplane actually. So the galley was in the centre where the engines were. So the stewards got the noise. Yeah, so that's where the galley was. And then you have 2 cabins. They're both the same standard. But the way it works as well with the stewards. So for the European work as well. The stewards were, as well as responsible for looking after you in flight, they're also responsible for procuring your food before flight. So they'd go down to Surrey Street Market in Croydon, buy up provisions, come back here and prepare it, and put it all in the aircraft, ready to go. So it's very much a very personal service.
Don't tell some of the modern airlines.
No, give them ideas. Thinking, what a great idea. Out of your salary, go and buy a provision for your passengers.
The spiral staircase in the corner there, which I assume was the...
That was originally the route up into the control tower, yeah. When the museum went in, they had to put another staircase in for people, for health and safety, really, because obviously lots of people are going to struggle with a spiral staircase. But yeah, beautiful original 1928. I mean, all these railings here, this is all 1928. And underneath the carpet, you've got the original floor as well. So the original fabric of the building's still here, lots of concrete. Anyway, let's go in. So we've got these fabulous pictures on the doors. HP-42 cockpit.
Wow.
Now that's a control column, isn't it? Really, look at that. That's a ship's wheel.
Steering wheel. Yeah,
that is a ship's wheel, isn't it? So there's great big rudder pedals as well with straps on it. You can strap yourself in there, get ready to haul it round the sky. I'm not sure it's the most ergonomic design, but. A fabulous aeroplane. Come on in.
Oh, wow.
So this was...
Wow, this is exciting. Huge wooden propellers here.
Yeah,
we've got
HP-42 propellers.
Is it?
So that would have been off the W variant, so the European variant. It's been cleaned up, 11 foot wide they are. So they're quite big. And then the single ones are the ones they used on the E variant, the Eastern variant. And the one on the left here is probably... That's been used, and that's sort of its original sort of condition, what it was like. And they were in 2 parts because they could pack them down there and put them inside the aircraft and transport them off down to wherever they were going in the Middle East or Africa, wherever they were flying. And we've got this globe here as well. It tells us sort of how air travel was developed and all the different routes and the different stages of the routes. Sort of, they slowly built that global network as they built all these outstations. And lots of these places we're going to today, it's like, the London-Paris route, that route's over 100 years old, so a lot of these routes are...
And that was the first primary route out of Croydon?
that was it, yeah. It was...
in the world, that was the first airline.
Well, I think it was really. It was like the first scheduled flight was 25th of August 1919, and that was London-Paris. Yeah. And that route just carried on. It's like when Hounslow Heath was... curtailed after 6 months, they moved it to Croydon. That route just carried on. Then it started developing more routes, London Amsterdam, London Brussels. It started sort of developing it all on from there. So, amazing history and amazing achievement as well at the time. If you look at what they're operating with, what they've got to build, and they're building it from scratch as well. I think it's a blank canvas they've got to build on, but at the same time, it's like, what's it? What do we need? What does it look like? What does air transport look like? How does it work? How do we make it work? So it's very much a work in progress. And it was developing really, really fast. Look at the biplane airliners you've got, how fast they developed, and the speeds. At the end of the 20s, they're doing 100 miles an hour. At the end of the 30s, they're doing almost 300 miles an hour. And again, of course, Second World War, jet engines, speeds again have doubled. Yeah. So it's amazing. It's amazing how fast they've developed.
And what would this room that we're standing in now?
This would have been the sleeping quarters for the staff here. So the CATOs, the civil aviation traffic officers, the radio officers, and the Met officers as well. So they'd sleep here, ready like cold springs. And
why did Croydon close?
Eventually, the reason it closed is because ultimately you couldn't expand it because it's built up all around here. There was a planning proposal to use the playing fields on the other side of the Purley Way, and you'd need something of that scale really to be a viable airport and fully develop it. But it didn't get planning permission, and it was unlikely to really. It just wasn't big enough, and it didn't have a tarmac runway. Yeah, so really, even when it got to the Second World War, the traffic had grown so much, and aircraft were developing at such a rate, they were already looking at other options. And Heathrow, which was originally Fairey's development airfield, I think that was used by the 8th Army or by one of the American Air Forces in the Second World War, had big concrete runways. They'd already developed that. So they're already looking at it thinking, do you know what, this is a better location. It's actually got better infrastructure there. So apart from not having any terminal, which you've probably seen the photos where they've got tents there, the actual airfield itself, for operation, for aircraft, was much, much better. Yeah. And they'd already put that money in. So Croydon would need a lot of development. And it wasn't really an ideal location as well. The airfield itself is on a slope upwards. Yeah. So it wasn't particularly flat. And as you're saying, Gatwick, actually, that was redeveloped in 1958. This was finally closed in 1959. Yeah. It was already planning to be closed in the mid-50s, but really it didn't really fit in with air transport at the time. So that was it. End of an era. Yeah. Fantastic history and a good starting block, but end of an era.
Speaking of end of an era, there's a very poignant exhibit here, which is a bag that belonged to Amy Johnson that she carried on her final fated flight. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, this is one of the very few things that were recovered from that flight. Amy's, it's been well reported at the time as well. Amy's body in the aircraft were never recovered, and a few things that were recovered were 2 of her flight bags. I think her checkbook, which she crashed into the Thames estuary. So very sad. I think probably what happened was she was delivering an aircraft we know for Air Transport Auxiliary. It was really poor weather, and I think probably what she was trying to do was do a visual letdown because she didn't have any navigation aids. But the weather was so poor, I think she probably wasn't sure where she was, and she probably knew she was over the water, and that was a safe base to try and let down to get below the clouds so she could make a landing. So she was well overdue, and I think she was probably running out of fuel. She had, I think, about 4.5 hours fuel, and it was pretty much at the end of that. So I think she was getting to a situation where her position was quite critical, that she needed to try and get down somewhere. But as it was, we think she ditched in the Thames. HMS Hazelmere saw something in the water, so they tried to attempt to rescue a tent, but they couldn't manage to. They saw somebody in the water that they retrospectively thought was Amy, but they didn't manage to recover her. So, and that was a very sad end for someone who had quite an extraordinary achievements and success. But that's it. One of the very, very rare artefacts to Amy Johnson's flight bag. Lots of record-breaking stuff there. And we come to the next room. So what we got in here... There's a bit more on sort of the history of Imperial Airways, some Battle of Britain stuff, some aircraft seats through the ages.
Oh,
you can see how they developed.
Wicker chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just wonderful.
And also stuff to do with air traffic control and Jimmy Jeff's licence as well. The world's first air traffic control licence. Certificate number 1. They still have a yellow book today, actually. So he sort of, they put the date, they dated it back to when he started here, which was 22nd of February 1922. It was actually issued in 1953, I believe. But the chairs, we can see how they develop very, very quickly. So wicker chairs, very light, very strong. And you've got this version here that only had 3 legs on it to save even more weight. No seat belts. Then moving on to HP 42. So when we sort of partially reconstructed that to show what it would have looked like as well. So we think the actual chair came from sort of apprentices, sort of apprenticeships, sort of training, sort of build these chairs as well, because none of the aircraft actually survive. But we've actually got one of the seats. It is actually incredibly light. So
it looks heavy, doesn't it?
It does look heavy, but
heavy.
actually it is actually relatively light.
Oh, wow.
You can sort of feel the weight of that. There's not much to it at all. Very.
That looks like a lovely sort of sofa, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is very, very comfy.
Yeah.
It's it is. It's like a railway carriage, a more comfortable version of that. No seatbelts initially, so none of that safety nonsense. So,
Are you still acquiring?
If stuff
pieces for the museum.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's coming to light here.
Yeah, if this stuff does come up, we do like to build on it, especially stuff that's relevant to it. So we do get pieces do come our way every now and again as well. I think once we sort of open the museum up as well, it starts to attract interest, and things start coming your way, because before this we didn't have anywhere to display anything, so we had this organisation didn't have a museum. So once you get that though, people start giving you stuff, which is really, really good. So we've got some really good artefacts. So lots of this stuff here, when we originally opened, we didn't have it. So it's good to see this.
You've got a lovely weighing scale here with the big face, the big dial.
Absolutely.
And am I right in saying they weighed not only the baggage but also the passengers?
They did.
Well, why don't they still do that? I don't understand that.
It's eminently sensible, isn't it? Yeah.
To fly.
Yeah, it is. So that was part of it. So you'd get weighed before you checked in. In fact, we got a photo somewhere like check-in desk with a scale. Somebody getting weighed. You get weighed. Your baggage you get weighed. You and your bags have a certain allowance. If there's an excess baggage charge, if you're over that, for example, the rather robust, rotund gentleman
there.
there.
The world's heaviest air passenger.
Mr. Jeremy Curley.
Mr. Douglas Duff, the author who weighs 25 stone, boarding an airliner at Croydon in the 1930s.
Would that have meant that other passengers couldn't have flown because of the, I must say, Jess, excessive weight that he was bearing?
No, I don't think so. I think it was more of a case of we need how much you weigh. And I'm sure, actually, if you had 25 passengers like Mr. Duff here, that might be a bit of a problem.
Yes.
So, but I don't think that ever was the case. But you've got a seating plan there. Well, you can see everyone's, weights there. So, you do a manual weight and balance, really, for the aircraft, get everyone balanced up. I mean, I have had actually in the day job where we did once have a American football team on board. And actually that did become a problem because they were all really big blokes and really heavy. And we actually had to limit the seats and what they had on board as well. Wow. So because the aircraft was only an ATR 42, because it was actually getting outside the weight and balance for the aircraft. So it was a bit of a headache on that day trying to work that out. Because normally you just work with standard weights, but these guys weren't standard weights. So that was quite interesting. And then with the seats, you can see how quickly they've developed, really, because this is the Armstrong Whitworth Ensign, which is only late 1930s. But you've gone from Wicker's chairs, so that's late 1920s. This is early 1930s, then late 1930s. You've got something that actually resembles what we see as an airline seat nowadays. Armrest, reclines, headrests.
Just slightly bigger.
That's it. You probably... Yeah, that's it. Everyone would probably kill for that sort of amount of space now in an airliner, wouldn't they? But you can see how it's developed. Really, the 1930s was quite a big step change in sort of aircraft design and how they're, what they look like, how they're operating, the technology on board.
When did safety really become an overriding concern?
I think safety was always a factor. I think it was a case of there was regulations in place to make it safe, but you learn from experience, don't you? So you start regulating. When things happen, they keep occurring, think, well, what can we do to make this safer? So, for example, initially you would have some sort of life jacket when you're crossing the channel. Seatbelts weren't mandatory, but of course, as time goes on, there's accidents, they start looking at these things, well, how can we make it safer? That's when you start getting seatbelts. But it was always regulated right from the get-go. There was always regulations, but the regulations, of course, would have to catch up with aircraft technology and what's occurring in the environment as they're building that experience. I mean, one thing with aviation as well, going right back to the very early days as well, it's very much an open culture, and reporting accidents. Every accident was always investigated in detail, so you could learn lessons from it. So what happened? How can we improve and prevent that from happening in the future? So that was all very much at the fore. And the reason we've got this airport is actually due to an air accident. So it was an accident on 24th of December 1924. An aircraft took off from here, going to Paris, but it crashed a minute and a half later. And some of those factors in the accident that came out were just the conditions at the airfield, saying, it really wasn't ideal for airline operations. It was the area they were using was small, it was uphill, it was boggy at the time. Because it was near the ridge as well, you get turbulence off the ridge as well, which quite affected the performance of the aircraft at the time. So they looked at that and said, well, how can we make this safer? So they looked at, we can enlarge the airfield, we can move the flying area, we can make the whole thing bigger, and we can build a better airfield. So that was very much part of it. And that drove what we have here, which is a much better place to operate from. Great. So that's all very serious, isn't it? Anyway.
No, it's fascinating. Yeah.
So we go around, Wiswell, that's it. So there'll be a lot of that going on.
My father's sexton.
Yeah, well, they used to take, star shots and stuff like that. Yeah, it was amazing. So, I mean, when you get down to, sort of deepest Africa, whilst we had radio support in, here in London, here in the UK and over Europe, that's got more and more sporadic as you started getting over, towards the Middle East and Africa as well. They did have radio stations, but you didn't get the level of support. So a lot of the time it was really they were on their own. So any way they could navigate by, they could. Of course, navigating over the desert was difficult. And one of the first things they did when they were establishing the routes down through Cairo in the Middle East, down through Basra and Baghdad, actually ploughed a furrow in the desert. So the aircraft would actually have something to follow because it's visual nav, yeah. So that was their navigation aid. There was this furrow that the RAF had ploughed about 500 miles so they could follow that. It is. So it's that rudimentary at the time. So when we talk about, for example, radio position fixing here, that's a major, major step change. That really is. That's really improving your navigation capability. It's making the operation safer, more accurate. Also means that you've got more chance that your service is actually going to get to the destination as well, rather than sort of the weather actually preventing you from doing that. We're going to go up to the tower now.
So this staircase was put in because people couldn't go up the spiral staircase.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so this is it for the museum.
That's amazing. So it's accessible to.
Yeah, well, this is it. So it makes it more accessible to people because the spiral staircase, although it looks fabulous, it's quite narrow and quite steep.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's probably induced a few accidents.
Yeah. Oh wow, the light already.
So here we are. So this is it. This is
amazing.
Sort of cutting edge air traffic control 1928. This is the world's biggest, most advanced air traffic control centre on the planet, in what was the world's biggest airport terminal, the world's biggest airport. So it's been partially recreated to represent what it was like at the time. So you can see how air traffic controllers went about the operation. Facing this way, this would have been a fantastic vista across the airfield. You had a 270-degree view. When we were outside as well, we saw some clocks in the balconies. And they were actually all linked in together to that clock there, that clock in the corner. So that was part of the master clock system. So, and even though it's 1928 technology, it's accurate to a few thousandths of a second a month. So pilots would set their watches and the clocks the aircraft to the time outside. And they're using that for navigation.
I love the way the windows have got the...
it's great. It's great. It was a great design. So when the museum was put in, it was they've got a special museum specialist design company to put it all together. And we've added to things over the years.
So it basically looks like you're looking out on the airfield in
this is what you were seeing. Yeah. Most of that is sort of late 50s. So you would have seen sort of some of the hangars over there.
That's incredible.
That way would have been the airfield. And then we got lots of other bits and pieces around as well, and a few installations for kids. Just to see if this door's open. Yes, it is. Great.
So this is the radio room.
So this is the radio room. So this is where the radio officers would have worked. And originally this partition would have gone all the way across. So the radio officers here, people like Fred Mockford, would have been communicating with the aircraft using radio telephony and also Morse code, because that was still very much in use, using a goniometer, which they've got there, to get a position, get a bearing on the aircraft as it makes a transmission, and then that information, they'd get the information as well. So LIM would also pick that information up, which is out on the Kent coast. And also Pullham, the airship station. They bring that all together, then pass that information over to the CATOs, the Civil Aviation Traffic Officers, who will plot it on a chart over there. They actually use that hatch there to pass the information out. And they get all that done in about 30 seconds. It's amazing. It's super efficient. Yeah. And actually you can see that in the corner. This is a replica of the board that Jimmy Jeffs would have used. So you've got the three stations in use.
Amazing.
So you've got Croydon there, you've got Lymm, you've got Pullham, and they'd pick up the radio bearings. And it's sort of simple radio triangulation, which is what your GPS is based on. Now we all walk around with GPSs in our phone and think nothing of it. It's sat nav, off we go. But this is really the bare bones of what that's all about, how that works. So that was one of the main things they could do. And then we've got a chart there, what it would have been like, all different airliners. Each airline would have had a flag for it. And again, they're getting manually moved by the CATOs to represent where the aircraft are on their position reports.
Was there a general flow direction?
Yeah, they did have sort of designated routes that they try and stick to. You've got the railway line that's... It was built 120, 150 years ago that goes from Red Hill right down to Ashford. It's a straight line. Yeah. So that was one of the routes, and you go across the channel. And they generally trying to have a sort of a southbound flow and a northbound flow, so that when the weather was poor, they try and keep the traffic away from each other. There was an accident in 1922 over northern France near Picardy. We had the sort of first aerial collision of sort of commercial airliners. And from that, they just tried to, again, improve things a little bit more. There was already some air routes in place in the UK, but they hadn't really quite got that far in developing those further. And you had the general rule of altitudes, and keep the line feature on your left. Yeah. That was one of the original rules that was already there when the legislation first went in. But they just developed that a little bit further and made that a general rule. And just try and develop a few more air routes as well to avoid matters like that. So there was very much a system with it, and it was sort of designated. And it was quite, I think you look at sort of the regulations in place and they're developing it. It was quite They were on it. Yeah. They were putting this system in place. It wasn't just a free-for-all, go off and do your own thing. It was very much a case of they had these procedures, systems and operations in place to make it as safe as possible and as effective as possible.
And after the war, or the Second World War, obviously radar started.
Yeah.
Was Croydon fitted with radar?
No, it wasn't. I mean, again, this is one of these things. Some of the airfields are always getting things like ILSs. Yeah. And they're starting to, Heathrow got radar, but this didn't have radar. It was pretty much all procedural here, so it was quite basic. But
was the writing on the wall for the end of Croydon?
I think it was really, Once Heathrow came into operation, and this was then downgraded to sort of the second airport, and they'd already looked at what you could do with it, and it was limited. So I think really it was. I don't think that decision was made until the early 50s, but it really didn't have much of a future. You could just see the way air travel was going. The way aircraft were developing now, they were getting bigger, heavier, and faster, and you needed a big space for that, and you didn't have that here. You just didn't have it here.
But as I think we may have alluded to earlier, had Croydon not closed, this building wouldn't be here anymore. Probably.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
I think
it is doubly sort, because you look at all these other airfields that are around, and it's quite rare. If they've been around for a long time, you very rarely see any of the original buildings because they get bulldozed and get redeveloped.
I think Dublin's got quite a nice sort of Art Deco terminal.
Right. Yeah, there's a few around. I mean,
Shoreham.
For example, Le Bourget was originally the sort of the Paris airport, so they had like a mansion house in the 1920s and a few outbuildings. That was their terminal. And then they redeveloped that in the late 30s. Now, that's still there, but that's sort of really the generation after this. Yeah. They developed again. There was such a big step change in the 30s that the buildings got bigger again. This very quickly almost became too small. So in just a decade, the passenger traffic, 9-fold increase. It's a monster. We talk about increases now of like 4% a year, but you were getting 100%, every few years. It's extraordinary.
I flew into Zanzibar 3 or 4 years ago, and if you ever want to see, something that just has never moved on beyond the 40s and 50s, the terminal there was just magical. Weighing scales, those huge ones with the clock faces that we described before, on every check-in desk. And it was just completely open. It was old, and someone told me very sadly that it's just recently been modernised, which I think is a shame.
That's a shame.
They should have kept that in aspect because it was absolutely stunning.
And that's probably what Croydon would look like. It would have had all those desks, those big teak desks, and those big weighing scales that everyone used to have to stand on to get weighed before they got on the aircraft. So that would have been very much part of it at the time. I mean, there are still one or two sort of 30s terminals that are still around, like Shoreham. That was built something like 34 or 36. That was definitely Art Deco. You touched on Poirot earlier. They used that a few times as a substitute for Croydon.
But long may this building remain, and it will.
It will. It's Grade 2 star listed, so it has got protection as well, which is really, really good. That's really important. So it should be here for forevermore.
The museum financially is in good health.
Good health. It's good. We're in a good position here. We get when we do open up, we only open up on the first Sunday of every month because it takes a lot of people to make it work. Because we have to guide people through the building. But it's they sell out, so all the slots sell out, which is really, really good. So it's really popular. So
how do people get onto those tours?
So we book via Eventbrite, which we open up about 2 weeks before the open days, which is always on the first Sunday of every month. So they can book on there and book their slot there. You can do that. So if they look up Croydon Airport Visitor Centre, they'll find it there. We also advertise it on our website and our social media.
It's a brilliant website, by the way.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like it.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, good. We'll have to add some more. That's just a little bit of the history.
It's amazing. It's been a heck of a tour.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Is there anything we haven't seen?
I think you've probably seen... I think you've seen most of it, really. The rest of it is really just Taking it in, enjoying the photos, really.
Yeah. So.
Have you enjoyed it, Rob? Because this has been on your wish list, I think, since we even started talking about doing a podcast.
Because I'm so old, I thought I would have been 2 when this closed. So, it has been on my wish list for ages, because I'd seen pictures of this control tower as we see it now, and I thought, God, it would be great to see that in person. And I got in touch with Ian very early on. Yeah. And then lockdown hit, and then all sorts of other things. So it's taken 3 years to get us here today, and we only live about 15 miles away.
That's the way of it, isn't it? But it's good. I'm glad you made it, and I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Absolutely fascinating, and thoroughly recommended for anybody who loves classical aviation.
Yeah. We're enormously grateful to Ian Walker for his fascinating and hugely informative tour. We had a really great day. And if you're interested in visiting Croydon, just go on to historiccroydonairport.org.uk and sign up for one of their monthly open days. You'll love it. Do keep an eye open on the socials at Top Landing Gear for future podcasts, and on our website toplandinggear.com, where you'll find every podcast we've ever recorded. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back soon with our podcast from Dunsfold, home of the Hurricane and the Harrier. Until then, bye for now.